We're here tonight to discuss the recent changes to our public safety power shutoffs. You will hear us refer to the phrase PSPS throughout the evening. That stands for Public Safety Power Shutoff. So we're going to be talking about the changes to the criteria that impacts you and your community. As many of you have personally experienced, losing your power for any amount of time is a hardship. And while it's frustrating and inconvenient, we have a responsibility to keep you and the community safe from the devastating impacts of wildfire, like the ones that we saw last year. I recognize how difficult PSPS is. We rely on electricity to power our lives today. I have elderly relatives that live in high fire areas, and they are impacted by PSPS. I know how inconvenient it is. However, the impacts of a wildfire are much more devastating than a PSPS event. So we hope you will partner with us and other local agencies as we jointly prepare for PSPS this summer. We mentioned last year, for those of you that may have attended our community meetings, that we thought PSPS would be more extreme last year than it was in 2024. We actually, for those of you that recall, we were very lucky last year because we had a pretty mild season. We had early rain in October and November, and that essentially ended our heavy wildfire season. This year, we have the same concerns. We could have more PSPS than we did in 2025, and even more than 2024, given that we've made some adjustments to the PSPS methodology. So we're hosting this virtual meeting to help answer questions and share resources that you may find helpful. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. As I mentioned at the top, click on the Q&A button, type them in the chat, and we will answer during the Q&A portion of the presentation. As you can see from the agenda, we're joined here today by subject matter experts who will share information about the conditions we closely monitor and evaluate when making a PSPS decision. We'll also update you on our efforts to strengthen the grid to reduce some of the PSPS impacts and share information about customer programs and resources. We want this to be a helpful session where we can help answer questions and make sure you walk away prepared for a PSPS event. So first, let's get started with safety. You can move to the next slide. There we go. Safety is Edison's #1 priority. So we actually start every meeting that we have at the company with a safety moment. So today I'd like to speak with you about safety near downed power lines. If you encounter a downed power line, please stay away and call 911. Always assume that a downed power line is energized and dangerous. It may look innocent, it may look like it's not energized, but please assume it's energized and dangerous. Stay clear of anything contacting down wires, including fences, trees, cable, or phone lines. So please remind yourself of that. If you see a car accident or you see down power lines, please assume it's energized, stay away, and call 911. With that, I'm going to turn it over to CAL FIRE Chief Sean Fairbanks, who is joining us tonight to share lessons learned on the preparedness from a county and state perspective. So with that, Chief Fairbanks, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Sean Fairbanks, Deputy Chief of Utility Wildfire Mitigation. Just want to go over some things to be prepared during this fire season. Unfortunately, we do have fires in Santa Barbara, Ventura, Riverside, and San Diego right now. Fire season is here, and we have limited snowpack. Our larger complex incidents may be here earlier this summer months compared to normal. We can prepare early, increase our personal safety and the survivability chances of our homes with defensible space and home hardening. What is defensible space and why is it so important? Protects life by making the structure more survivable during advancing wildfire. It also provides firefighter safety, a safe area to work in to defend structures during fires, and reduces the chances of a wildfire entering a structure and reduces the chance of a structure fire becoming a wildfire. Next slide, please. So one of the things is defensible space, and we've heard about Zone 0. That's, fire-resistant plants, getting rid of that mulch and other stuff, enclosing our eaves, fire-resistant plants, potted plants. So that 0 to 5 feet, you want to take a lot of consideration. The #1 cause of fire spread is embers. So we can, really focus in on that Zone 0 that really help your structure survivability. And then we have the 5 to 30 feet. This is where we're going to keep our grasses mowed. and then also our ladder fuels cleared out of these areas. And then you have the 30 to 100 feet on the outside. This is, more ladder fuels getting removed, and also having your tree spacing. All three of these zones together really protect your home and help the spread of wildfire. Once a structure becomes involved, it is now a continuous fuel, just like brush. So having defensible space uh, gives you a good percentage of eliminating that fire spread. Next slide, please. So along with defensible space, home hardening, those both together really make the survivability of your home and have preparedness. Sometimes we have to shelter in place to a fast-moving fire. So if you take these considerations, like in your home, have fire-resistive siding. Make sure your roof is composite roof. Again, closed eaves. Your decking is fire-resistive. These are all factors and components, but you also have to worry about the stuff around your home. Make sure that ornamental vegetation is potted. Make sure a lot of that vegetation is cleared in that zero zone, like I was speaking. Where's your vehicles parked? RVs, boats, move those away from your house if you have the availability to do so. We all have miscellaneous structures, sheds, and all that. Make sure that those have the same fire resistive and spacing that's needed to stop fire spread. Again, if these are done together, it really, protects your livelihood, your safety, and your survivability of your home. Next slide, please. Uh, so with communities making mitigation efforts and utilities also hardening their systems and doing mitigations on their side, with all of us doing collective mitigation, it makes our community safer and more wildfire resistant. This takes efforts with everybody, as we can already see with the fire season already starting. Uh, I want to say to go to readyforwildfire.org. It helps you plan ahead of what you can do, evacuate quickly, know your escape routes, keep informed on what fires are doing, and just be prepared. Have that stuff that you want to get out immediately, your pets, have that all in your mind, ready to go and taken care of. So if you do have to leave rapidly, so again, go to readyforwildfire.org. There's a lot of good information to protect yourself and how to harden your home. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Fairbanks. Those were some great reminders of things that we can be doing now to prepare for the wildfire season. So thank you again, Chief Fairbanks, for joining us. I'll now turn this over to my SE colleague, Heather Kane, a fire science expert here at Southern California Edison. So Heather?
There we go. Thank you, Chrissy, and good evening, everyone. So I'm going to start off talking about what happened last year. We were getting prepared for a big PSPS season, kind of looking at a lot of impacts coming up. There was a lot of vegetation out there, and then the tides kind of turned for us. We got a little bit of early rain in the fall, and it led to some early green up. And when I talk about early green up, we're talking about the grasses just generally greening, those coming to life. That provides a natural mitigation for fire activity in the foothills and throughout the forest. So it was very welcome for all of us for the grasses to really start popping up sooner. And it also coincided with fewer wind events. We had fewer wind events in the fall. It wasn't incredibly windy during the time period, because usually in the fall, that's when living vegetation out in the wildland is at its driest. And when that's at its driest, it's when it's dormant out in the forests and whatnot. And when we get some wind events, we can actually see some rapidly moving fires. And that's when we try to have PSPS events to prevent any ignitions there. But we didn't see a lot of wind events that happened last year. And we also coincidentally got November and December rains. So we got a lot of heavy rainstorms kind of coming in, not all at once. They were kind of intermittent. We started getting them monthly, and we started to see an early end to fire season. So it was very welcome, very needed, I think, after the previous year and the earlier in the year that what happened there. So it was very welcome for all of us, I'm sure. Next slide, please. All right, so looking at what we're seeing this season, right now, just kind of starting off with what can possibly happen going into the summer and fall. There's a lot of different scenarios that can occur. So going into the summer right now, what we're kind of seeing is there are the potential for more thunderstorms this summer. And what I mean by that is we get monsoonal moisture that comes from the southeast, kind of goes through, and what can happen is kind of two different scenarios. We can either have monsoonal rains when it gets really humid out there. We start seeing some thunderstorms and rain up in the mountains, or sometimes it actually coincides with some dry thunderstorms that push through and we can have some lightning. So dry lightning storms that'll come up. I think a pretty decent lightning event I think we had was in 2020. So you start seeing a lot of lightning fires, just fires that are kind of popping up like that, not necessarily from winds or anything, but you could see a bunch of fire activity start to pop up with those types of events. And then we're also seeing potentially hotter than normal this summer. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see heat, like huge heat waves coming through, right? It could be a couple degrees hotter, but you start to kind of feel it a little hotter than normal and just a little bit uncomfortable. So it's something we're kind of looking out for, because when we start getting those really hot temperatures that just persist throughout the summer, we can get a lot of fuel-driven fire activity. So those big fires that happen without any wind. Turning over to drought, the right-hand side, a little bit of a this one is a little bit older, just a couple days. So right now we have a little bit of minimal drought on the eastern side, kind of like south of Las Vegas going into the other states. But other than that, it's just looking very drier than normal right now for Southern California, at least in our service territory. And but that's not really expected to improve. We're really starting to see drought start to enhance a little bit, especially in Northern California. But over time, that's really going to start to come to fruition for us as well. So it's just something to kind of keep an eye out for. And Chief Fairbanks did mention it, the vegetation is drying out earlier than normal. Even though we had those green grasses really start a little bit sooner than normal, we're starting to see those really brown a lot quicker than we would have preferred to see them dry out. So you've probably noticed those fires that Chief Fairbanks also mentioned, and those are kind of going on. A lot of it's in the grasses, kind of transcending into some of the dead vegetation right now. Luckily, our living vegetation moisture is a little bit high. Not so much higher than normal, but still in the range to where we're not going to see those huge fires that will be possible when we start getting into the summer months. So right now, just kind of seeing an uptick in fire activity, so it's something to be cautious about. And there is a little bit of uncertainty regarding the fall, depending on the overall patterns. That's what's really going to show the wind events and strength, and also the timing of precipitation. Since we have an El Nino pattern really coming to fruition, what we're going to be starting to see is kind of what comes with that El Nino, right? And we're looking at a strong El Nino kind of coming in. And what generally happens with that type of pattern is we can see precipitation come in a little bit later than normal, even though we still have a decent amount of precipitation, but we could also see less wind events. So it's kind of something to just monitor for right now, especially when we start looking at other huge weather systems that we call teleconnections in the weather world. And we just have to see how some things line up just to really get an idea for what's actually going to happen this fall. But once the fall comes, and even maybe during the summer, during those dry and windy periods, we could see the possibility for some PSPS. Next slide, please. All right, and this is just kind of to go over sometimes what ends up happening is you see from the National Weather Service, maybe you don't see some active wind patterns kind of popping up, and then SCE saying, hey, maybe we're going to have some PSPS possibilities, looking really gusty. And that really has to do with the definition of models that we have. We actually have some ensemble modeling, and you can kind of see the difference between what's shown on the left-hand side of this slide to where it's kind of a little bit bigger blocks, bigger cells. And on the right-hand side, you can see that it's more defined, kind of showing you localized areas being more, we get more definition into where we're concerned. So that's kind of the overall difference, I guess, between the National Weather Service and what SCE does for its modeling and all the capabilities that we do have, because we also have machine learning models that use actual weather and actual conditions to make models better in order to predict what can happen in actuality. So that's a little bit of an insight there. And next slide, please. And I was just talking about all those forecasts we use, but we do operate on observations. So this is a weather station. We do have a plethora of weather stations across the service territory. And what we do is we use this information to actually make de-energization decisions. So we do have a forecast, but power isn't turned off based on a forecast. It's based on an observation. So we want to see those conditions come to fruition. And the forecast is used to notify people who could have the potential of getting PSPS'd, but we wait until those conditions really start to show up. So I think that's kind of the difference how SE operates. When we use these weather stations across the service territory to really provide as much situational awareness as we can. And I think that's all I have. So next slide, please. I'm going to be passing it over to Jude Schneider, and she's going to talk about PSPS operations, the update, and grid hardening.
Thank you, Heather. Heather is one of my colleagues in our business resiliency unit. Business resiliency is our emergency response group. Heather is one of 3 fire scientists. We have 10 meteorologists, 3 fire managers who are cross-trained as linemen and also firefighters, seismologists, and we manage a team of 900 emergency response personnel who are cross-trained from other duties in our company. So we're very wired into emergency response, and particularly wildfire response. This slide is just to sort of set the stage. Why are we doing PSPS? And this is on the CAL FIRE website. The most destructive wildfires in California history, and you'll see that between 2016 and 2025 it just jumped up remarkably. Now you could also look at the largest acreage and the most deadly fires. These 3 they're all on the CAL FIRE site, but this is what we're facing, this is what we're looking at, and this is essentially why we're doing PSPS, because we're seeing that the risk of wildfire, and for us, the risk of utility-caused wildfire, has really jumped up. And the CPUC allows us to do PSPS as a tool of last resort. You can find this on the CPUC website if you'd like. But that's kind of the framing for why we are in this together. And certainly we want to be partnered. It was great having Chief Fairbanks speaking, and we want to partner with our communities to really figure out how to be resilient in the face of this enormous risk, which is frankly, new in the last, it's been increasing, especially in the last 10 years. Next slide, please. So I wanted to walk you through how we decide to do PSPS, how we decide to turn off power. And I want to acknowledge that today's community group includes people who have never experienced a PSPS event or haven't recently. So for some customers, this might be something we've gone through before, but for some, this is new. So we have a baseline criteria what we're looking at, and it's a 3-legged stool. We're looking at wind speeds, we're looking at the dryness of the vegetation, both live fuels and dead fuels, as Heather referred to, and then wind. And without the wind, there could potentially be wildfires, but there's not the potential for the utility-caused wildfire. So you wouldn't see the power off in those circumstances. So we establish a baseline criteria for each of our circuits or circuit segments. And we have those weather stations located on or near most circuits, and many circuit segments. We have 200 of them, which I think I'll bring up again later. And we determine what risky fire weather is for each one of these circuits or segments. We have 2 kinds of wires, and again, we'll get into that a little more later, but bare wire, and for these circuits, we're looking at 30-mile-per-hour winds or 46-mile-per-hour gusts to make it, to put them in, to base the baseline decision making here for PSPS. Covered conductor, meaning it's literally covered, so it isn't, it's resilient against like sparks, or vegetation, or even tarps and blowing into it. And those have wind speeds of 40 miles per hour sustained, or 58 miles per hour gust. And then there are a couple other like minor distinctions that there. Then we have a wind threshold. That's a threshold at which a forecast wind speed will trigger a PSPS event. So using historic data, using modeling, using weather forecasts, we determined that there was going to be a PSPS event. And we look at the forecast peak fire potential index, which is the formula using winds and humidity and fuels. We look at circuit health factors, meaning how strong is that particular circuit? Are there issues? Are there issues we weren't able to correct before the winds came up? Fire risk severity. How severe could a fire be there? What are the consequences? For instance, are there egress issues? You know, we're particularly concerned about areas where there's not a lot of roads available if there was a fire. And then a wind trigger. So we're in an event, and some of those 900 folks are sitting in an operations room, and we are looking at a moving spreadsheet of the winds as they approach our wind triggers. We have a couple other things we're looking at. Urban conflagration, meaning could it potentially affect a huge community as opposed to, you know, a forest fire, which we used to have. Are fire suppression levels, or are there fire forces available if we have a fire, or are there big fires in other parts of the state, so we're compromised? Event size and complexity. If there's going to be a lot of circuits that we have to turn off in a short amount of time, we're going to get started earlier to make sure that we are managing that risk. And then if there's a particularly dangerous situation, a PDS, a National Weather Service PDS, that would also influence our decision when to pull the trigger. And by the way, I'll answer questions later if you put them into the Q&A, because I know this is complex and I'm talking quickly. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is our notification timeline. And this is the cadence of a PSPS. So we start looking at 4 to 7 days in advance of the event. Those are the forecasts that Heather referred to. 3 days in advance, we'll send a notification to all customers and public safety partners, and it will say we are anticipating high winds and fire activity, and there is a potential that we will be turning off your power starting the afternoon of Thursday. Then we'll send updates, daily updates, the next day and the next day if there is that extra day. And then 1 to 4 hours before we shut off power, we'll send an expected shut-off notification saying it's a warning that we've gotten close and we could shut off your power at any time. Now, we used to send renewals of this until our customers sort of cried uncle and said, you know, enough, you don't have to tell me at 2 in the morning and then again at 6 in the morning. So once you've gotten that, you're kind of in that warning phase. Then we'll authorize power shutoff, and within 10 minutes or so, power will be shut off. It's not exactly the exact same time because we authorize then we turn off. And then we send another notification when we're starting to patrol for restoration. But it's a long process because we have to look at every wire and make sure that there aren't any things that could cause faults or fires after the event. Typically, we say this takes up to 8 hours. Could take longer if we need a helicopter or if we need daylight. Could be a lot shorter because, you know, if we started ground zero and we move out, somebody gets restored pretty quickly, and, you know, the end of the line is closer to that 8 hours. And then we'll send a note after we've restored power. And if you get a notification that we've restored your power and your power isn't restored, you should call in the outage, because that means that there is some other issue. Because generally speaking, if we think your power is restored, we need to know if it's not. And then there's a little disclaimer here, which is that, weather is not completely predictable. That's why it's a forecast. And the weather could turn. It could be not exactly where we thought it was. It could come up faster. So there are times when we don't hit this schedule. Now I want to talk a little bit about what's not PSPS, because after every meeting, I sort of get in a discussion about notifications that customers didn't get. And frequently we're in this very confusing time because it's extremely windy and the power could go down, right? Because of the wind. It's not necessarily that we've turned it off proactively. So if you don't get a notification, you should go to our website and look at the outage map, and it will tell you what kind of outage it is. If it's on the outage map and you can see that there's a PSPS box that comes up, then we have indeed done a PSPS, but it could be that there's another kind of outage. I will say PSPS events can be long, and that's one of the reasons we're having this meeting. The other kind of outage, repair outage, if it's just individually, if it's not a huge mass event, we can restore power within like 5 hours. We wouldn't restore power if it was during a big windstorm, like a PSPS event. We would wait for that to end. And then the third kind of outage is a maintenance outage if we need to do some work on your line. The notifications for PSPS are not, you can't opt out of those. They're emergency notifications, and we're going to send them. The notifications for repair and maintenance are opt-in. We are now opting all customers in, but there are some customers who have opted out, especially customers who've been around for a while who said, I don't want to hear from you. So it's worth checking if your power goes out and you haven't gotten notification. Make sure that you've signed up for notifications. And that's really, there's more to notifications, but let me stop there in the interest of time and move on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what you'll see in the field in your neighborhood during and before a PSPS event. Up to 5 days before the event, so in that 7-day period when we're seeing that there could be a PSPS event, we're going to have we're going to have crews out patrolling for potential hazards that could be a danger to our equipment or fire risk. And we're going to identify if the equipment looks like it's deteriorating. And that's, as I referred to earlier, how we're looking at circuit health. Then during the event, we will have live field observers stationed in the field, and they're going to look at the conditions. They're going to see whether the winds are exactly as we had predicted. They have handheld weather stations that they can raise up on a pole to get the wind speed either higher or lower. And then they can, if they find damage, they'll call it in immediately. They won't wait till the event ends. And then there's this restoration patrol, which I also mentioned, which is as soon as the weather is better and we can restore power, they're going to go out and look at every foot of every line to make sure that there isn't any kind of damage, any blow-ins, any lines down, to make sure that no hazards are existing. After the big storms in January 2025, we found 90 instances of actual damage that we were able to prevent. So that's one of the reasons it takes so long to restore power. I'm excited to say that we are upping our drone pilot presence this year. So we're putting more drones in trucks, and we're going to have drones there to help, especially for those circuits that we can only restore otherwise with a helicopter or during daylight or rough terrain. We have some that are actually walk-in, hard to believe, but so for those we're going to start there with some of the drones. So that's hopefully going to help make us more efficient at restoring power. And I think let's go to the next slide. I've talked about a little bit of this. Covered conductor, you can see there what we're talking about. It literally has a rubber covering on it. We have done 7,000 plus miles of covered conductor. as we harden our grid to prevent, and it's not only prevents or raises the PSPS wind thresholds, but it also actually makes our reduces the number of outages for other reasons, like, squirrels on the line, for instance. Protective devices and settings can understand when there's a fault in the line and quickly shut off power. So those are also making things safer. Fire-resistant poles and wraps, and whenever a pole goes down in a high fire risk area, we will replace it with a pole that is fire-resistant or wrapped. Targeted undergrounding, this comes up a lot. We have done 90 plus miles of undergrounding. Undergrounding is slow, expensive, and requires a lot of permitting and a lot of public coming together to approve where we're going with it, and so it's not an easy process. And then we're hardening our transmission lines as well to and all of this is in our wildfire mitigation plan, which talks about our spend on this and our timing. So if you're interested, you can look on our website and you can see this actual plan. Quickly, I'm going to go to vegetation management. Next slide. So before fire season, we inspect up to 1.6 million trees using trucks, using drones, using LiDAR, and we cut back any tree that could potentially fall into a power line. You can see the 12-foot the scale there of what we're looking at. We remove hazard trees beyond the traditional trim zone. We really want to keep our lines safe from any kind of blow-in. And we, as I said, use remote sensing and satellite technology. We got a question about how we can help customers with vegetation management on their properties. And we won't do that unless our utility lines are involved. However, the California Fire Safe Council is a good source to talk to about vegetation management for your own property. Next slide. And my last two slides here are sort of, well, honestly, they're about the frustrations of the PSPS landscape. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this one. So this is an actual, although I'm going to be anonymous here, but an actual substation and actual lines. And and I'm going to say that if you want to see your circuitry, you can go to this website that's on there, drpep.sc.com, and play around with it, and it will show you your actual circuit that you're on, and you can see where it's connected and where the substation is. We actually picked this up from that public facing map. So you can see here that the substation is that purple dot. And there's a neighborhood at the end there in the red circle, and it's completely undergrounded. However, it is powered by that blue line that goes from the substation into the red circle. And if we were to call a PSPS and shut that line down, we have no other way of keeping that undergrounded neighborhood energized. So it would go out for PSPS. And we're working through to understand where we can do switching to get circuit segments like that onto other lines so that doesn't happen. But that's sort of, honestly, when you hear, well, I'm under, my neighbors, their power's underground and we turn them off. That is indeed does happen sometimes very disappointingly. Next slide. Next slide. This is a variation on the same theme, essentially, which is that you can see that there's a home here in the box on the orange line there. And we're going to have to turn off power to that home, which is because we've de-energized north of it, where you see the orange arrow that says de-energized, even though the neighbors who are on the turquoise line are energized, but the wires just, they don't connect. So we don't have a way of keeping that customer on. And you'll see that he is not actually even in the high fire risk area, but just tangential to it. So those are sort of the outliers. Usually when we turn off power, it is because there are high winds on the actual circuit, but that's sort of the math that we're doing when we do events. So that's it. I've said a lot. Please do, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A so I can answer them. And I'm going to bring up my colleague, Rosa Perea, to talk about the customer experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Rosa Perea, and I'm the Senior Manager for our PSPS Customer Experience team. I also serve as a Customer Care Branch Director when we activate an incident management team during PSPS and other emergencies. We know that PSPS and other outages are a hardship to communities, especially to individuals with access and functional needs. We also understand that losing power for any amount of time is disruptive and inconvenient. So today I do want to share some important information on emergency preparedness, resiliency planning, as well as some SE programs that can help mitigate the impacts of PSPS. Okay, so more than a quarter of SE service area is in high fire risk areas. And as climate change and drought make wildfires a year-round concern, being prepared for emergencies and potential power outages, including PSPS, is more important than ever. Hopefully some of this information is familiar to you, and I'm not going to cover all of it. I know it's a lot. First, it's important to build your kit. Every household should have an emergency preparedness kit that is easy to access for all family members. Some key items include, but not limited to, flashlights with fresh batteries, a first aid kit, current prescription medications, non-perishable food, and external battery packs to keep your mobile devices charged. And don't forget to include special items for infants, older adults, or any family members with disabilities. And don't forget about your pets as well. They need go bags too. Second, make a plan. Have a plan that having a plan that means your family knows exactly what to do when an emergency strikes. So practice that plan with everyone in your household, including how to manually open garage doors and how to shut off your home utilities like your gas line, water, and electricity. And something we not always remember, but making sure we have at least half a tank of gas or charge in our vehicles at all times. Staying informed is also important. SE provides multiple ways to stay informed before, during, and after an outage. So make sure you're signed up for notifications. You can get them via email, text, or phone, and you can do that on se.com. And we also want to make sure that, throughout the year, you make sure that your contact information is up to date so we can continue to send you timely notifications. We also encourage you to use our interactive SE outage map to track outage status and access real-time weather updates. Make sure you have battery-powered radio available to access critical news and updates in case other communication channels go down. And then finally, having some backup power options. So if you don't have one already, you may want to consider investing in portable batteries or a generator. SE offers rebates on qualifying portable generators and portable power stations to help customers that live in high fire risk areas be more prepared. And I'll share some of the information on those rebates in a couple minutes. And then finally, for more resources or to download a preparedness kit checklist, you can visit se.com/be prepared. All right. So earlier, Jude did cover the notifications timeline during a PSPS, and those notifications typically begin 3 days before a potential PSPS and continue through the restoration period. So to ensure that our communities stay informed during a PSPS, we provide notifications by email, text, and voice based on what you've identified as your preference. In addition, address level alerts are also available so that non-account holders can stay informed. This is very helpful for parents who have children that go to schools on different circuits from their home, renters who are not the SC account holders for their residents, or those of us who have family in high fire risk areas and want to stay informed of possible PSPS conditions. You can sign up for address-specific alerts on scepsps.com. Right. We also have an interactive consolidated outage map that incorporates PSPS outages, and that's available at sce.com/outage map. Some recent updates that were made to the map include information loading faster and being more focused and accessible, and the view and search options are more customer friendly. That includes making it easier for customers to report an outage that's not already showing on the map, and improving the experience for customers who are searching for power outage statuses for addresses that are not served by SCE. The outage map also shows the locations of resources that are available during PSPS, including community resource centers, community crew vehicles, EV charging stations, hotel assistance, and food bank support. Slide. We have also established 116 community resource centers across our service area, with 9 of them being designated as to stay fully operational even when the surrounding area is without power. At these locations, you can charge your devices, keep medications at a safe temperature, and access the help you need with staff that's ready to assist you, including translation services in over 120 languages and American Sign Language. We also recognize that not everyone can easily get to a resource center, especially in rural and hard-to-reach parts of our communities. And that is why we have 8 community crew vehicles that provide the same essential services as the Community Resource Center. We have also created 8 resiliency zones. Those are strategically chosen locations where we have installed backup generators so that businesses that you depend on most can keep operating even during a PSPS. We know that resources alone don't eliminate the hardship of a power shutoff, but they do represent our commitment to making sure you're not left without support during a PSPS. Next slide. Next, I want to share some of the additional support for our customers with access and functional needs and the outreach we do to them, especially during PSPS. SC offers targeted support for schools and senior care facilities that have been frequently impacted by PSPS, helping ensure continuity for our most vulnerable populations. We also partner with community-based organizations to increase awareness of medical baseline program, promote enrollments, as well as deliver direct assistance to customers with access and functional needs. These organizations also provide referrals for additional services. We have a partnership with WW.One California, who supports customers with access and functional needs and provides support through emergency preparedness, transportation, lodging, food assistance, and other services. Customers with access and functional needs can dial 211 during a PSPS, text the word prepare to 211-211, or use the 211 Now Care Coordination app for personalized support and resource referrals. We also work with local food banks to support food replacement during PSPS. Enrolling in the medical baseline program provides customers who use life support devices with access to backup battery assistance. So if you or someone you know has not yet taken advantage of this program, please enroll now. Our chat moderator will be posting the links to the program enrollment forms in the chat. And I do want to share that if we are not able to confirm initial PSPS notifications to our medical baseline program or critical care customers, we do dispatch a field service representative to do a physical door knock to notify them of the upcoming PSPS conditions. And this is something that I've personally overseen in my role as a customer care branch director during PSPS. And finally, I want to share that we're also continuing to improve accessibility by incorporating more American Sign Language into our marketing videos and our PSPS notifications. Slide. Okay, we have several backup battery resiliency rebating programs available. First is our critical care battery program, which provides free batteries augmented with a solar panel to medical baseline customers in high fire risk areas. We have a team that assesses the needs of our customers and then delivers the hardware directly to the customers. Next is the in-event battery loan program for customers that don't qualify or haven't taken advantage of the critical care battery program, but do not have a need to power a medical or assistive device during PSPS. And for those customers, SE will coordinate the drop-off and pick up the batteries from the customer's home at the end of the event. We also have rebates for portable generators for residential and non-residential customers located in high fire risk areas. The rebate is higher for customers on the California alternate rates for energy or the CARE program, the Family Electric Rate Assistance FARA program, or medical baseline allowance. And those programs offer up to $800 rebate for customers purchasing a power generator that is enrolled in CARE, FARA, or medical baseline allowance program and that reside in HFRA. And second, we have up to $200 rebate for portable power stations for customers that reside in high fire risk areas. Since 2020, SC has issued over 20,000 rebates for portable power stations and generators and has distributed close to 27,000 backup batteries to medical baseline customers that reside in high fire risk area. We do have a resources slide at the end of the presentation that contains links to helpful resources and these programs. So when that comes to your inbox, please take advantage and share the resources with your loved ones and your neighbors, please. Next slide. And now I'm going to briefly touch on backup generators and their role as part of your resiliency planning. So backup generators and having a plan to safely fuel and operate them can be the most important part of preparing for outages. We recommend that you always work with a licensed electrician to ensure the proper equipment and safe installation. It's important to understand the safety risks, especially when working with fuel sources such as gas, propane, or diesel in often challenging conditions, so proper safety protocols are critical. There are two main types of generators. The first is portable generators that power individual appliances, and second, those that are interconnected to your electrical panel using a transfer switch. If you're installing one of these that's interconnected, an interconnection application must be submitted to SCE, and those generators must meet electrical codes and be disconnected from the grid during the outages to prevent backfeeding, which can then create serious safety risks for utility crews that are working on power lines. Finally, generator size and cost depend on your electrical load. So these can often be reduced by improving the energy efficiency in your home and or focusing on the essential load. So thank you again for joining us tonight. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Christy for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Heather, Jude, and Rosa. We appreciate you taking the time to walk us through the details associated with PSPS. I want to thank all of you that are listening in for your attention throughout the presentation. And this is your opportunity now to ask questions as we dive deeper into the topics that we discussed. So I see that there have been a couple questions that have already come in, but we now invite you to participate in our active Q&A session. Again, if you have a question, please click the Q&A button at the top and type in your question. We will not be using the raise hand feature tonight, given the number of people that are on the call. We want to make sure that you all walk away with a better understanding of how to prepare for a PSPS event. So we kindly ask that you ask your questions as it relates to PSPS, and we will do our best to get through all of the questions with the time remaining that we have. So feel free to review the questions in the chat. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if there's a question that you like, you don't need to retype it. Just click the upvote button, and that will raise it to the top. So we will go through based on the most popular questions. So with that, let me go ahead and get started, and we will start from the top. So appreciate, some folks have thanked us for having this session. One question came in about how can I obtain a copy of the slides, and will they be posted on the SE website? Yes, I'll touch on this actually in my closing comments, but for everybody who RSVP'd for the event, you will get an email that has a copy of the slides and a recording of tonight's session. We are recording it. And then we will post both the slides and the recording on SE.com's website in the coming days. So know that you will have access to all the information that we have provided here tonight. We have a couple of questions from Ethan. Thank you so much from Ethan Beagle. The first question is, you mentioned wind speeds, but is that sustained over a certain amount of time? Like wind speeds greater than your stated speed for an hour or 6 hours? So with that, Jude, I'm going to have you touch on the wind speed question and how we determine those thresholds. So Jude?
Yeah, thank you. So those weather stations you saw in Heather's presentation give us readings every 10 minutes. And so we sustained wind would be wind over the course of a 10-minute or a couple 10-minute readings. And then a gust would be sort of a one-off. Are there gusts that are coming in within the 10 minutes? But I realized that I should probably also ask Heather to, because this is Heather's field. Heather, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Jude. So when we talk about, I think from the forecasting perspective, that's kind of something I start with. When we forecast, we do forecasts based off of 3 hourly periods. So we'll bring in things, then we have specific thresholds like Jude was talking about for circuit level decisions. And what we'll do is we'll forecast being, does it meet this criteria? Does it meet wind speed? And or the wind gust threshold is expected to meet that during that 3 hour period. That's when we move it. If it's a yes, that's when we move it from out of scope to in scope. And then from there, like what Jude was talking about, we'll observe those winds using the weather station criteria and whatnot. And when we get those readings every 10 minutes, we'll see when the observations come to fruition and that those thresholds are met to make an action. So I think that covers on it. So we do observe both and kind of just take both into account in real time.
Great. Thank you both, Heather and Jude, and thank you, Ethan, for the question. The next couple of questions are about notifications. So Jude, I may start with you, and then if Rosa wants to chime in. But there's 2 questions here about notifications. So the first is from Ethan. What kind of notification is given, and what is the time frame before a PSPS event occurs for a business? So let's start there, Jude. I think you touched on this during your presentation, but perhaps you can recap what type of notification and what's the time frame before a PSPS event occurs for a business.
The first notifications for all customers, business customers or residential customers, is in that 3-day out. It's between 48 and 72 hours out. And then some large businesses will have account managers who are in customer service who also might work with them to let them know that there's going to be an outage. But we don't distinguish. I will say one of the things, and Rosa mentioned that there's different ways of getting notifications, and we tend to recommend that businesses get email notifications. That way they can be filtered, especially if you have more than one meter address, so you can make sure that you're not inundated, but that you know where to look for those PSPS announcements. But it's the same, I guess is the answer.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you, Jude. The next question is from Christina Crabtree. Thank you so much for your question, and it's a 2-parter. So I'm going to give the first part to Jude and then the second part to Rosa. But let me read the question. And again, Christina, thank you for your question. It says, are the notifications going to be better than last year? They would be inaccurate and not have any updates for hours. Sometimes saying it would be out, but I would have power. And then suddenly, 8 hours later, my power would go off when all other areas of the city were turned back on. And then it was out for several days. Is SE going to pay for all the spoiled food that we have to replace in cases like that? So maybe the first part is around notifications and will that be improved? So Jude, why don't you take that one, and then I'll have Rosa talk about the food spoilage.
So we believe in continuous improvement. We've tried to improve our notifications, and we work through our systems to get our notifications to have less failures in notifications. That being said, we have a very high notification success rate, but sometimes the way the event is structured, the way our notifications are structured, are just difficult to, they're not exactly how you would potentially want them, because we're notifying thousands of customers at the same time. So let me just look at this. We will notify customers on a daily basis. And then I think I mentioned that 1 to 4 hours in advance when you're in the warning period. And it's kind of a tension, because we don't want to continue notifying customers to the degree that it's overwhelming. So there is going to be a lapse. We will have notified you. I think the best answer here is go to our outage website. The outage website should be giving you the most accurate and the most timely information, because we'll send out notifications on a cadence, but you won't necessarily see what is going on right this minute, because we don't notify people every hour. So I would say use the outage map. And suddenly, okay, and then here's an interesting thing. I would have power, and then suddenly 8 hours later, my power would go off. So one of the things we struggle with is we'll have these long wind events, and Heather can talk about this too, where there's like really strong winds, then they kind of drop off for 24 hours, and then there are really strong winds the next day. So what we try to do, if we can, is restore power at least temporarily, because it's just so much better to have power for 8 hours than go out again than to have no power for several days. So it sounds like you might have experienced something like that, where we were able to restore your power temporarily, but the event wasn't over, so we took it back down. And then when all other areas of the city were turned back on, again, that gets to you're on a particular circuit segment, and not all circuit segments are equal. Depending on the wind risk, you saw Heather's map, you can see that we're getting really targeted in that very specific area. And so there might have been additional risk in your area, while the greater city had areas of it had less risk, so their power was restored. I think that's the answer. I don't know how satisfying that is, but that is sort of my trying to understand and forensically what you're talking about. And I'll patch Rosa for that part of it.
Yeah, part two of that was around is SE going to pay for all the spoiled food? So Rosa, if you can respond to that.
Yes, I do want to confirm that food loss or property damage that occurs as a result of a PSPS due to weather event is unfortunately not covered for reimbursement per the California Public Utilities Commission guidelines. And then I did want to chime in on the question for the business customer notifications.
Yeah, okay.
I think they mentioned they were a large customer, so I encourage you to work with your assigned SE account manager to make sure that the right names are in the system for the outage notifications. I know we have emergency outage, PSPS, there's a couple fields in there. So please work with your account manager to make sure we have the most up-to-date information to make sure that the notifications are going to the right person, please.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rosa. And thank you, Christina, for the question. The next question is from Octavia Thus, and I'm going to give this one to Jude. Are the shutoffs you speak of regarding local distribution lines or larger transmission lines?
For the most part, local distribution lines. We potentially would do PSPS on sub-transmission or transmission lines, but that would be very rare.
Great. Okay, thank you. The next question is from Robert, and I know we responded, but I'll read the question for the audience here. What about weed vegetation? Our property has an easement in behind our fence line where our neighbor power lines are. How often will SE trim this? It's been done before. So yeah, we gave you, Robert, we want to make sure that we specifically address your property line, but for everybody else, as Jude mentioned, we inspect 1.6 million trees every year. So we have inspectors go out and then identify which trees need to be trimmed. And so that prescription rate can vary depending on the year and the amount of moisture we received throughout the year. But we have somebody looking at every tree every year, and then identifying which trees need to be trimmed. And then typically, once a tree is identified as needing a trim, that happens within 60 days of the inspection. Separately, we have a weed abatement program where we are abating weeds around all of our facilities on a regular cadence. And again, the frequency depends on the amount of precipitation and the location of the power lines. But Robert, for your specific question, please use that email address and we can respond to you to make sure that your specific property line question gets answered. The next question, I think Rosa may have answered this, but let's just confirm. And so Rosa, I'll ask you to come on again. It's, does SE provide updates for large businesses, for PSPS account holders, in case those notifications get sent to proper individuals? Businesses may or may not stay on top of that for where and who it goes to. It would be helpful if SE sent occasional email reminders about where these communications go.
Hi, Christy. Yeah, that was part of my answer earlier. Definitely encourage the customers to work with their assigned account manager to make sure that the right contacts are set up in our system for outage notifications.
Okay, great. Thank you. So another question that came in is from Lupe. And the question is, what if phones are down? How can we reach out to 211 and cannot? How can we reach out to 211 and cannot, but need emergency services? So maybe just a little bit of background on telecommunications. So the telecommunications companies are classified as critical infrastructure, and they must maintain service continuity during planned or unplanned outages, including emergencies like PSPS. So the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, mandates that facilities-based telecom providers have at least 72 hours of backup power at critical sites, supporting emergency communications and 911, setting up a baseline for network resiliency. Now, not all cell towers are subject to the same backup power requirements, but providers are still responsible for continuity planning across their networks, especially during a forecasted or high-risk event. So industry best practices expect telecom providers to design networks with redundancy so that they can continue to provide power and backup power and build those operational capabilities to minimize outage impacts. SCE does not regulate the telecommunication providers. That's what the Public Utilities Commission does. However, we do closely coordinate with them before and during PSPS events, offering advanced notifications up to 3 days before potential PSPS and daily coordination calls to support their resiliency planning. Regulatory authority, as I mentioned, over the telecom providers or their backup power investments is under the California Public Utilities Commission, as well as the federal regulators. So our role, SCE, is to collaborate and provide information needed to meet their resiliency, regulatory, and service obligations during a PSPS and other emergency conditions. So we recognize that phone line service is critical, and so that's why we coordinate closely with the telecommunication companies to give them advance warning so that they can build in redundancy and have backup power up to 72 hours. So Lupe, I know that was a little long, but hopefully that helps answer your question about 211 and those services.
And Christy, I can chime
Please.
in as well. So we do definitely encourage customers to do advanced coordination with 211, like now before the official start of wildfire season. And if for whatever reason you don't have phone service or anything like that, you can always come into one of our community resource centers or the community crew vehicles, and our staff there could help connect you with 211.
Thank you, Rosa. Appreciate that. So hopefully, Lupe, that provides some additional help. Okay, the next question is, what is the threshold for this is from Octavia. Thank you again. What is the threshold for shutting off local distribution lines and larger transmission lines on PSPS days? I think it's going to vary, but I think, Heather, are you in a position to be able to answer this one?
Yes, I can answer this one. So as long as the winds are approaching the triggers and thresholds are being met in the area, when it starts approaching those higher winds, especially during these PDS events, and for others that don't know what PDS stands for, that's potentially dangerous situations that can be announced through the National Weather Service. And they'll put out these warnings in advance, and it could be any type of event. Sometimes they do it for just really dry days. Sometimes it's for extreme winds, downsloping winds. So it really depends on the type of situation. But it will be when it starts approaching that threshold or trigger that there will be a de-energization, and it could be shut off in advance to potentially prevent anything from happening, right? And this is really explained further in the technical paper that can be found online as well. So if you want to read up on that, but as it's going to be turned off ahead of time if the thresholds start being approached.
Great, thank you, Heather. The next question was from Anne. Sorry, the name got cut off here, but the question was, are you going to send out the Q&A questions via email? So yeah, as I mentioned, everyone who RSVP will get a copy of the slides, and then this is being recorded. That includes the Q&A, and so you will have a copy of the recording with with all the questions being asked as well as the answers. So hopefully that helps in case you wanted to hear some of the Q&A again. Robert, you had a follow-up, which is a great follow-up around the weed abatement and vegetation. Your question is, what if the situation is along an entire neighborhood? For example, power lines run along Los Angeles Alley and Simi Valley for several blocks. Trees seem to be mainly trimmed. However, weeds are easily 6 feet tall. Does the whole neighborhood need to reach out for SE to come by and assess? No, what I would say, Robert, is shoot us an email to that email address, let us know the area, and we will send somebody out to take a look. Appreciate you flagging this. So I'm going to try to scan through the questions again, and I'm going to ask the team if they saw any questions that I missed. I'm doing a quick scan here. I don't see any that I missed, but
Christy, someone asked about where to find information on the generator and portable battery rebates and critical care backup program. So we're going to post the links to both in the chat.
Okay, great. Yes, I see that question from Sarah. Where can we access rebate information for backup batteries in our generators so we can avoid food spoilage? Food has become very expensive year over year. That is true. Replacing spoilage may be more expensive than purchasing a battery these days. Okay, thank you, Sarah. As you heard, we're going to post a response to that so that you have some information. Christine, I see a note came in from you. It was just a bit chaotic and nutsy out here on the eastern end of the Inland Empire. I appreciate you trying to address my issues. I think there will always be some problems during wind events. I'm hoping for less PSPS, so I don't have to deal with it at all. We're with you, Christina. We are hoping for less PSPS as well. So appreciate the update. Let me see if there was, I think another comment came through. Octavia is asking, where can she access the technical paper that was mentioned? So Heather or Jude, can somebody respond to that one?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, we'll put that in the chat. Let me
Thank
ask.
you, Jude.
Yeah, let me ask the team. Is there anything else that I missed? I'm not sure. I think we got to all of them. Okay, unless, yeah, I see. Okay, I think we have touched on all the questions. So, so I want to thank everybody for joining. This concludes the Q&A portion of our meeting. And thank you all for your questions and feedback. These were great questions. If we didn't get to your question, I think we were able to get to all the questions. So that won't be relevant here. Please know we value your feedback and encourage you to scan this QR code. Sorry, was that on the previous slide? The QR code to complete a survey about this evening's event. Here we go. So we'll leave that up for a moment. We would love to get your feedback. We do take this to heart and make adjustments based on the feedback. So if you can, please scan this so that you will get the survey. We'll leave it up for a couple more seconds. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. So there's some to the next slide. There's some displayed on the screen are several helpful resources. As I mentioned, additional materials are going to be emailed to the registered attendees, including a link to the presentation and a recording of this meeting, which will include the entire Q&A. I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us this evening and learn more about our grid hardening work and how to be prepared for a PSPS event, a public safety power shutoff. We understand that PSPS outages have a significant impact to some communities. We recognize the challenges and hardships that these outages have caused, and we're committed to supporting you through these difficult times. We're trying to provide as much information and resources available so that we all can be prepared as a community. Your resilience and cooperation are invaluable as we strive to enhance our services and ensure your safety. Thank you again. I'll go to the last slide. Thank you again. This concludes our meeting. We will post the recording on our website in a few days, and it will be at se.com/wildfire, as well as other information and resources. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We hope you found this valuable. We look forward to seeing your feedback on the survey. Please be safe. Take care.